This is The Fabulist. I'm Joel Pilger, and I'm diving deep into the intersection of creativity and commerce with little more than my curiosity and a microphone. Along with my generous collaborators at Coop Studios, I'm traveling the world to gather all the insights that studio leaders need but are way too busy to grasp. We're talking to the motion makers, the fable finders, the storytellers. If you're running a disruptive enterprise in motion or animation, live action, sound or music, experiential, I'm here to celebrate you for not merely participating in the industry, but for reinventing it. Because the future isn't just coming at us, it's being created. So let's get after it. All right, so it's funny, I was looking at your website just the other day to refresh my memory. And when I was thinking back to the genesis of let's do a podcast, it actually goes back. I was in Chicago because I had just done a dinner, one of my dinners the night before at Swarovski with that whole posse. The next day, you and I chatted about what I was building in Forum. And here's what you're going to laugh at me. I don't remember. I think we started talking about AI, but the angle that you took on it made me go, wait, what? That would be fun to unpack. Now, I don't know if it was AI, so this is me being full disclosure.
You know, it's definitely,
right? If
it's me, it's AI. Okay. I mean, that's all I think about, obsess about, talk about. So what was shared to me, which I thought was a good angle, was the transition from analog to digital was nothing compared to what's coming with AI. And that's a pretty decent encapsulation of, I think, what's potentially going to happen. Being of that era, I went to college in the mid-90s. I cut tape, one of the last classes to cut audio tape.
And by cut, you literally mean with a razor blade.
With a razor. Yeah, I love that. I'm so glad I got to do that. I started using Pro Tools 3 in 96. Like, it was really early on, and I was excited about the undo button instead of a piece of tape.
Right.
But I still love that I got to do that experience, and all those expressions of craft, you know, that built up over 40 or 50 years, at least to be on the tail end of it, was incredibly valuable.
My first experience cutting was on an 8mm editor, where we're literally having 8mm film and we're cutting it with a razor blade and splicing it with tape. And when we ran out of splicing tape, we would use Scotch tape to literally put the film together. And then our special effects were putting a needle on the film to scratch and make the lasers, this whole trick.
But how much did you think about that edit? How much were you sure that's where you wanted to edit? It's too easy now.
Yeah, no, exactly. You were like, well, I'm about to cut it. Do we want to cut it on this frame or a few frames earlier? Is it before he lifts the lightsaber or is it right as he lifts the light? Well, whatever it is, man, you better mean it.
So then you really had to think about the craft, like what would have the impact. You can't do 1,000 things and hit undo 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And should we go back to that world? Can we? No. But we all had to get the core of what moves people and what works in motion and through sound that is disappearing the easier the tools get. The democratization of technology and what the impact that has is incredible. It's amazing. The way it opens up access to tools and sort of chops down ivory towers that limited access to people around the world, people of different means, people of different backgrounds, is awesome. The digital music audio recording revolution that created bedroom studios brought us all kinds of artists that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise. There are giant positives, but there's also, as an example, the recording studio engineer, industry, the recording engineer is dying fast.
Yeah.
And a lot of that craft, that institutional knowledge that isn't necessarily, its value isn't just in how you make electricity flow through circuits. It's in what are these tricks that really move people, you know, when they hear sound. And when the tools get more sophisticated and you can do more easily, that's great. But you forget how you got there as a collective society,
right?
As artists. And that sucks.
There's something that happens in the craft, and there's a big word I'm about to drop here. and it's called taste. Because I have this theory, and I keep hearing from smart guys like you and others, like my friend Ryan Summers, that the thing that is not going away is the importance of taste. But I'm going to ask you, is the process of learning a skill, the discipline, working with the mentors, being in the trenches, is that part of the way that we learn taste as well?
No. I mean, they're independent.
Okay.
So I use point of view. I mean, it's very similar to taste.
Okay.
But taste implies, I don't know, some sort of judgment. I think you have good taste, potentially. Mm-hmm. Whereas to me, and I literally told this to someone today, when I'm trying to assess creatives' work, their portfolio, their whatever, I'm looking, and I think we all are, for a point of view. Is there something authentic? I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to like it, but is there a thread across their work where there is an authentic artist trying to connect with other human beings? And if it's there, and I do, when I talk about taste, I say you can't teach taste. I can teach you how to edit. I can teach you how to construct a story. I can teach you how to write better. You can't teach taste. And this is the advantage that we have over the machines, and we'll continue to have for at least the near future.
Would you also put point of view in that same category of you can't teach someone to have a point of view? They have it or they don't as a human being?
Yeah, it's interchangeable there. Can't teach taste as an alliteration, so I like that. But I mean, I can't give you a point of view. Your point of view is your point of view. It's authenticity. It's tied to your humanity. We focus on our differences as humans, but really our similarities far outstrip everything. It's why Shakespeare can still be relevant today. But your slant on that humanity, your earned experience, and then how you translate it into a way that can resonate with other humans deeply, your vibe, to quote my company, and how you bring that out into the world is, I can't teach that.
Well, let me pause you for 1 sec. You mentioned your company a second ago, and that's probably a great opportunity for me to pause and say, wait a minute, who is this guy? Who is Michael? Because I think once people get to know you and a little bit of your background history, they're going to understand why we're having this conversation.
Yeah, sure. Michael Gilday, founder, partner, CEO, executive creative director of Deep Vibe Creative Agency. We call ourselves the creative agency of the future. The arc of my career has been kind of gone all over all different kinds of media production. I've traveled a lot of varied roads and become very broad in terms of my experience. And there's a couple areas where I may be the best guy in whatever small room I'm in, but for the most part, I try to be in rooms where I'm nowhere near the best person. But all those different roads on paper looked very terrible on my resume. Spending 2 years here, a year there. I spent a lot of time at agencies. I spent time in traditional film and television, on the broadcast, high production value, 100-plus person crew, Emmy award-winning television show, which I was in Hawaii at the time. I went to LA. I did terrible film and TV there for a few years. I popped over to the reality side and learned a lot about what 5 or 6 people can do, humping 20 to 30 cases around the country, which was really a precursor for a lot of this run and gun, smaller crew work that fuels a lot of what we do now in our industry.
How did all these experiences start to merge or coalesce into your more recent journey and ultimately bring you to Deep Vibe today?
Yeah, so I started making video on the internet in 2000 when video was postage stamp size.
Yeah.
And in 2010, I moved back to Boston and joined an agency where I focused on growing an in-house video production capability and started that path, my more sophisticated part of my career, where I was able to pull in and create very small teams along with great vendors, partners, collaborators that could punch above their weight class. And there are certain things that in-house teams are amazing at doing, in terms of like factory work and higher volume work. And there's great things that you go out to specialists. And I found a good way to synthesize the two and not have it be one or the other, but create more of a hybrid approach. I ended up taking that in-house to the brand side at technology brands and that's where that hybrid model really started to shine. I was at an AI company called Data Robot, and I became VP of storytelling and creative, and I was running all of creative for marketing. There was about 16 people working for me, and we were doing really good work in challenging environments. And things went a little sideways with the company, and my team had survived a couple rounds of rifts. So CEO came to me and he's like, I need you to cut 50% of your headcount dollars. And I was like, well, I'm the biggest number on that list, so I should probably go. I was kind of looking for an off-ramp anyway.
Got it.
And they didn't want me to leave, so we negotiated and came up with this plan where I would take out the US-based video team. There was 4 of us, and myself included, and start Deep Vibe. We brought Data Robot on as our first customer on a pretty healthy retainer agreement, and we were able to close the all-you-can-eat buffet, open up a much more reasonable a la carte menu with them, and take on more customers. And since then, it's been about 30 customers. Primarily, most of them are in the tech space, B2B, SaaS tech brands, in AI, ML, data, and analytics. So most of the stuff we do is direct to brand.
So this conversation that you and I had now quite a few months ago, when I was in Chicago, and you had dropped this sort of crazy bomb on me when you said, look, the transition from analog to digital is nothing compared to what we're about to go through because of AI and other technologies. Is that coming true for you today?
Well, I will say someone once said, which I really like, is that we overestimate what we can do in a year and we underestimate what can be done in a decade, right? Mm-hmm. And I think Gen AI is super fascinating because there is a lot of overestimation on what it can do based on people doing really interesting things, but they're all still experiments. But there's also an underappreciation of how transformative it is going to be when it really starts to get steam and speed. I think as an artist and as a creative, I think about these things a lot and their potential impacts and all that stuff. I think it's a phenomenal time to be alive, but I encourage everybody possible to go and spend time with whatever tool is out there that you've been turned on to and try to make it do what you want. And you will very quickly learn that it is very hard.
Yes. Same experience right here. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're trying to be more psychedelic and abstract or inspire ideas, use it as an idea assistant, it's phenomenal. But if you try to do exactly what you want, it's still very challenging, even with some of the best tools. And one thing we know, if we create content for brands as marketers, is they want exactly what they want. It's not as much of a threat, but you do have to lean into it.
So I was having a conversation with a very high-level creative executive at Monks, and he said, we've been exploring AI, using Gen AI for all kinds of things. He said, but we're now explicitly telling our clients that it's great in pre-production and it sucks in production. So not just that it's maybe not robust, not mature enough yet. We tell our clients, Gen AI is a problem. It creates messes. It creates more complexity. It creates more paradox of choice downstream. So therefore, client, the answer is no, we are not going to use these tools in these stages of the process because it will cost more money, more time, more frustration. And I thought that was a very healthy admission.
I think any good future-looking creative talent who's intoxicated by technology is figuring out which tools are going to have that rate of innovation that your effort put into learning how to make it work for you is actually worth the investment. And that's literally the hardest thing right now.
Right.
You still have to use that as a piece of your toolkit and still filter it through your point of view, your taste, to get real value out of it. Because what you're creating has to resonate with you. I firmly believe that if you don't impress yourself first, you're not going to create something that impresses anybody else.
For sure. There was a word I've heard dropped now and then in these conversations, and the word is intent. I heard someone talk about the reason that, say, ChatGPT will never sit down and write the next great novel that we all say, oh my God, you have to read that novel, is because that model doesn't have intent.
LLMs don't want to communicate anything. They don't know that they're communicating. Like how we get to AGI, like the core technologies and approaches of how we get to AGI and sentience and all that stuff, that's not this path. How we got here is not how we get there. I don't want to go there necessarily, but we probably will go there. But this set of technologies, when you understand as much as an artist can, like I don't claim to be a data scientist or a machine learning engineer, but I've talked to many of them, and the models don't know what they're saying to you. They're looking for patterns in data, and they're looking for how the application of words in the past or how images and pixels relate to each other in images that people find appealing, but it doesn't know what it's doing. And this is the scary part of AI and these kinds of emerging technologies that I try to get people to understand all the time is it's not that it's going to be a dystopian future and robots are going to take over. But what it is these technologies can scale at a rate unseen before. They can amplify good and amazing advances, and they can amplify bias and fake news and disinformation and bots. They can amplify the terrible stuff really fast. But the other bigger danger of them is the order of magnitude because they can support each other. So if you use ChatGPT or Claude to help you write better prompts in Midjourney, and then you use Midjourney in Luma or in Runway, when you're manually doing it, you can do way more amazing stuff than you could do with any of them individually. At some point, these technologies will be able to augment each other without me at the controls, whether it's autonomously or people taking advantage of that. And they can really scale each other really fast. And that's why we need to be having these conversations now. We need to be considering regulation. Like, I don't think regulation should be looked at as a blunt instrument to cut off innovation, but we need to start thinking about guardrails and watermarking and more sophisticated ways to use the technology to help track what the technology is doing or the impact, because this Pandora's box can get out of control really fast. And not to get too political, but we had two candidates running for president, and neither of them, I think, had used the internet by choice in their life. And I find that very concerning. To cut hair, you need a license. I think we can ensure that if you are engaging in practices that can affect the whole world. Look at the Microsoft CrowdStrike outage. You can affect the whole world within minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, we could have more insight into that.
I was going to ask you this. I hate to use the word should here because it leads to, as we say, getting should all over. But when you think about the state of, let's just say, Gen AI, where it is, maybe where it's heading, who are the people that should be concerned about being disrupted? And maybe let's then transition to who are the people that really have nothing to be truly afraid of over the long term? Any thoughts on that?
So, yeah, it's the students, it's the young people. And some of them are in terms of being concerned about having their opportunities taken away. So I'm on the board of advisors at my alma mater, Emerson College. Every young person I talk to, I'm like, lean in, learn as much, be the person that older people like me who have a little more experience and influence and money look to you as their go-to person to help them stay relevant. Mm-hmm. Because all those apprenticeship opportunities, all those times that you could get in the door as a junior designer or as an assistant editor or as a junior animator, that is going to die a lot because we can use Gen AI as the writer's assistant, as the illustrator, as the designer. We can do more with smaller teams, which is amazing. But I'm very concerned that, that craft goes away, but also that opportunity to learn it goes away.
Right.
But there are people in our generation and older who aren't good at staying current. Agencies, I'm amazed at the agencies I talk to, and they're dinosaurs. And I'm like, you guys are like 5 years behind, never mind looking at tomorrow. And they see their business model dying, and they don't really do anything different. And the death of the music industry should teach us all a lesson that if you try to fight the technology and the desire paths of populations, you will end up losing all your power and all your influence. Not that music hasn't turned into something different and interesting, but the industry itself, the gatekeepers just got crushed. Like you can't stop technology, but you can shape it.
Right. The middlemen ultimately get eradicated. And
there's benefits to that, but there's negatives.
There are negatives,
too,
right? Because you lose curatorial and potentially taste. You lose points of view and things like that.
And artist development. Like U2 had 3 albums that weren't that great.
Dude.
But they stuck with them.
It's so funny you mentioned that. I mean, we must be on a similar wavelength, because I have a good friend who has spent most of his life in the music industry. Unlike you and I, he stuck with it and spent a decade as a producer and
I've got those
producing artists and so forth. Yeah. And
a couple did well.
Yeah. And I was making the point to him recently that when you and I talk about this transition from analog to digital and how it had enormous advantages, but it also had certain things that you and I would say were negatives, right? There were pros, there were cons. I would say this transition from digital to whatever is next that we're talking about. If I look at U2 as an example, I would submit, and I know this is a very opinionated and spicy thing I'm about to say, but I personally don't believe an album like Joshua Tree or Unforgettable Fire gets produced in 2024. Now, I know there's people's heads who are flying off because if you're a musician and an artist, you're like, how dare you? But I think the fundamental environment, the economics, the points of view, the curatorial, the artist development, all the things that you mentioned are combining to create a different alchemy nowadays where volume, quantity, and novelty supersedes these more qualitative things.
We've been living with AI in our daily lives for at least since the social era started. Algorithms are AI, and they have been impacting our taste and our culture and what we consume and how we consume it to an insane degree, and that has affected the art that comes out. So yes, when it does scale, it will have an order of magnitude more impact and be that much more disruptive. But we've been living with it, and we've seen some positive effects and we've seen some pretty ill effects as well. I do think that great art needs time to develop. And even great, less than art, but really commercially accessible music being a good example of those artists who are pop, but also artistic at the same time. U2 is a good example of that. I think we have less great examples of that later on, in that people who make great music that a lot of people enjoy, but it's a little more lowest common denominator, and the artistry is a little less original. But the other thing is, if you got into this to make money, then you messed up. This is the wrong thing to do, and it's just going to get worse. If you got into music to make money, then you made a mistake. Not that people don't make money doing that, but if that is your only driving motivation, you will never have enough gas in your tank to get there. If I can talk you out of going into a creative field here in 2024 with fears about AI and losing jobs and things not being as easy as they were at some other point, if I can talk you out of that, then you shouldn't be there. But if I tell you everything that could go wrong and you're still like, yeah, but I need to make things, I need to do it, then you're going to find a path. I've said it on the internet, on LinkedIn, that a lot of really mediocre motherfuckers should be scared.
Right.
And that's just true. I'm sorry. If you are not amazing at what you do, it's going to be a scary time. Doesn't mean you can't be. Doesn't mean you haven't discovered your genius inspiration or honed your skills to collaborate with other people in a way that creates something greater.
Oh, look at visual effects, right? Think about rig removal and rotoscoping and all these things that I get hit up, right, on a daily basis. You probably get these too, right? We're the shop in India that can do rotoscoping and all these other things for this much an hour. Can we get a call with you? And I think, yeah, you can have a call with me because I'm going to tell you why you should get into a completely different line of business.
Yeah, and I don't want to be an elitist snob, but this is going to come across that way anyway. When you and I were in college in that era, I don't know, there was probably half to a third as many kids studying in film schools and pursuing these kinds of creative crafts. And that number exploded. And When I started in marketing and advertising, you had to prove your worth for a long time. You really had to struggle. You had to get coffee. You had to be a gopher. You had to just do the stuff to prove that you were worth being in the room. Right, wrong, or indifferent, there was a lot of people would love to do this work. So you have to demonstrate why you belong here.
Yeah.
And that system had biases in it and all sorts of problems, but it also recognized an essential fact that not everybody can get paid to do creative work. And what we do with our production business is we have to do that and be amazing entrepreneurs and be amazing artists and be amazing at logistics and project management and all that stuff. That's a really hard gig.
Yes.
And I've heard you say that new studios are opening up every day and studios are closing too. Like, none of this stuff's easy. Not that I'm trying to discourage anybody, but you should only do this because you can't do anything else.
That's right.
Like, you need to be with like minds, lighting the fires and creating awesome stuff and taking a brief that isn't set up for success and finding that little bit of inspiration that gets through all the client gates and still ends up being something that holds together and is strong and powerful, despite the odds.
I'm chuckling because I have a friend who owns and operates a collection of coin-operated laundromats.
Much smarter business.
And he invited me to invest in his business years ago. And you know what my answer was? If I was only in it to make money, hell yes.
And let me ask you a question. At 5:05, do you think he's thinking this coin-operated laundromat? That dude loves life. He can go to a movie and just enjoy the movie. He doesn't get 5 minutes in and then think about this project that he's working on and lose 10 minutes of the movie because he's not up at 3 a.m, like researching AI.
He's a different cat, right? And so more power to him because that does it for him and those are his values and that's great. That's not me. I've chosen this other set of values, or maybe they were thrust upon me by nature or nurture or what have you. But here we are.
I'm going to compliment you here.
I'll take it.
Because this is why I appreciate you and some other folks who have looked at all of us and our desires to do these things and said, listen, you guys are really bad at business. You guys are really bad at sales. Not all of you. Collectively, you're good. So there's insights here and there's examples there. And if people like us, I think Chris Doe is a great example as well. I know you're friends with him. If all of you collectively can learn from each other, you can be better at this. And as an industry, instead of a race to the bottom, we can start elevating. And I appreciate that. And some of us are better at this stuff, at talking or sales or entrepreneurship. But collectively, we can all be better and it will benefit all of us together. But it does take people like you guys to say, I had an impact as an artist. This is a different kind of problem that I'm going to apply my creativity to at a much larger scale and try to create community, create connections, not have all the answers, but hopefully have the right questions. And I appreciate that. And I think a lot of us appreciate that because that is having way more impact than the pretty pictures and the pixels that we move around for someone else.
Well, that's very kind. I appreciate the compliment. I will say it comes from a place of the older I get, the more I believe that the creatives of the world, they must create, they must make. The world needs so desperately what the creatives have to contribute to the world, to society. But here's what I know is if we don't understand business and the ways of the world, we're not going to have that impact because business gives us reach and scale and influence. Maybe a lot of us started off thinking, if I just make cool shit, the rest is going to take care of itself. And then you eventually realize, no, I do have to appreciate and master these other aspects in order for me to be successful and for me to have a meaningful contribution to the world. So that's my motivation.
Along those lines, I didn't discover my real abilities as a creative leader and a creative facilitator and a director and executive creative director, all that stuff, or gain that confidence till later on because I can't draw pretty pictures and I'm an okay musician. It took me 20 years to get good at bass. I'm a good editor. I'm not an amazing editor. I'm not an animator. But there was a thread through all my work over time that I started to see that there was a level of quality, a level of storytelling. And I couldn't point at these individual contributors because they didn't work on all that stuff. They didn't even work on 5% of it. I did. And as I get older and become more of an experienced creative professional, I do pull myself more and more out of the project. But that doesn't mean that my impact isn't, in many cases, the reason why it happened. The people that I pull together, the way that I identify certain skill sets and create the conditions for them to collaborate in the right way while giving a little bit of my experience of ditches that I've driven into so they don't have to. But I've also discovered, because I love managing creatives and I have come to love it so much. And I have also learned that most people are really bad at it. Not necessarily in our space because this is what we do, but in life, like people expect, a creative, especially like in-house, they expect them to act like an accountant when it's time to act like a worker bee. Like they can't do that. Like I firmly believe you have to meet them where they are. If you do, you can get incredible things out of certain people. But when some people are trying to deny themselves for the button-up day job, meeting etiquette or whatever, the more I can strip that away from people having to do that stuff, the better. You can really lean into their superpower, but you have to meet them where they are. But you also have to continually push them out of their comfort zone. And one of the skills I didn't understand is that I can identify that magic something in somebody. I don't know what it is. I can't really describe it, but I'm like, that's a thing. If you let that person work in their environment, they will do amazing things. But also, if you take that and you put it with this one over here, even though both of them independently maybe are spinning off into space, but if they start working in synchronicity, oh my God. And having been a producer by trade, I firmly believe in how creative producers, like project managers and those kinds of producers are great. Those are valuable skills. But a creative producer can go from nothing to something, even if they can't do it themselves. Yeah. And they can create the people and the conditions and handle whatever incoming problem has and improvise. It's like jazz. And when you have those people and you create those conditions, what they make is 1,000,000 times greater than the sum of the parts.
Well, I'm going to say thank you for a very interesting conversation that went down some really interesting, I'm not going to say rabbit holes, because I think some of these are more like giant black holes in our industry that, are sucking us all in. But no, I appreciate your perspective.
This is my problem is I can't stay on thread or on message.
Oh no, we're all good. This is a really cool conversation. And I just appreciate the perspective and the experience that you bring to bear on these topics. So thanks for sharing your point of view is what I'm going to call it.
And my taste.
That's right. And
You're very similar.
No, thank you, Michael. It's really good.
Thank you. Keep doing what you're doing, man.
Thanks for listening. And thanks to my collaborators at Coop Studios. To learn more about them, visit coopstudios.com. As for you, if you're focused on running a strong and thriving creative company, consider joining Forum, my private network of the world's leading studios. For details, go to joelpilger.com.